Let's start off with a riddle, shall we? What does the way, tarot cards, and a chalice, and Leonardo da Vinci all have in common? Dan Brown, of course, or rather his late work, The Da Vinci Code. This mystery detective novel, first published on March 18, 2003, thrills through its interwoven puzzles as it guides the reader through a quest of unravelled religious secrets. It is a puzzle of connects the dots for the educated reader, identifying clues and drawing interconnected reasoning that ultimately leads to the light bulb moment that satisfies historical skeptics within the text's male-skewed target audience of young adults to the middle-aged. But how do we reach this light bulb moment? What makes us believe the text? The authoritative tone is the answer to this. The authoritative tone within the novel creates a platform upon which readers are more acceptable of the delivered information within the text. This tone is created through the stylistic device of intertextuality, which is heavily utilised in the book as seen in Langdon's perspective of the world being a web of profoundly intertwined histories and events. Similarly, the Da Vinci Code is a literary piece of intertwined texts that work together to support an argument and create that sense of authority that has you really believing the idea. This concept is what we will be focusing on this analysis today. Intertextuality and its creation of the authoritative tone through the intertextual subdevice of allusion. Through this presentation, we will be breaking down the technique so that we as fellow writers can better understand and employ intertextuality within our own work through the examples seen in the Da Vinci Code. We will be covering what intertextuality is, what allusion is, how it is used in the Da Vinci Code, how it works to create meaning with an authoritative tone with examples related to the Da Vinci Code. Then we will look at how we as writers can create this intertextual allusion, and to the same effect as Dan Brown does within this book. Then we will break that down in an example of my own work and have a look at how I use this device. So what is intertextuality? Intertextuality is defined as the interrelationship between texts, especially works of literature, the way that similar or related texts influence, reflect, or differ from each other. Therefore, intertextuality as a technique can be used stylistically to translate, create, and emphasize meaning through the relationship between one text and another. Intertextuality is often performed in reference to well-known texts, such as the Bible, pop culture references, etc., which people can identify with in order to recognize easily. This is to facilitate the audience's understanding of the relationship between the primary text and the text that you are writing. Additionally, the use of intertextuality within a work strengthens its ideas and arguments in a way that forges a sense of authority within the narrator. For these reasons, Brown employed this device within his work in order to strategically break bits of meaning from other works and lay them within his own to create a mosaic of references that build on each other to reach this light bulb moment that we speak of earlier. That light bulb in this case being the revelation of Jesus' bloodline. In doing this, various subdevices of intertextuality were employed within the novel, each working in different ways to layer and translate meaning. But in this presentation, we'll be focusing on just one. Let's delve into the way in which Dan Brown incorporated intertextuality through the sub-technique of allusion. So allusion is a form of intertextuality that is commonly used in literature and even in everyday dialogue. It is a technique that, when cleverly implemented, is very subtle and sometimes even unnoticed as intertextuality, but it does significantly affect the text meaning. Allusion has a place in the spectrum of figurative language as the text is being alluded to is used in a way of figurative expression. In simpler terms, a text that is being used to help describe or demonstrate something else is allusion. An example of this is within the following excerpt of the Da Vinci Code. As he moved toward the mist of fountains, Langdon had the uneasy sense he was crossing an imaginary threshold into another world. The dreamlike quality of the evening was settling around him again. 20 minutes ago he had been asleep in his hotel room. Now he was standing in front of a transparent pyramid built by the Sphinx, waiting for a policeman called the Bull. I'm trapped in a Salvador Dali painting, he thought. This excerpt of the novel is particularly useful in identifying the two distinct parts that make up allusion. The two parts are context and the reference. The context usually appears first, giving the reader the information they need about a scene. using particular descriptive words that link to and foreground the reference that will appear later. In this case, Brown is informing the readers of Langdon's adventure into the Louvre with the police, while incorporating a surreal theme in his work through descriptions of the scene of imaginary and dreamlike to hint at the disorientation experienced by the protagonist. Additionally, the author foregrounds a sense of absurdity through the policeman's unusual name, Bull, and also the completely unrelated and absurd notion of the Sphinx being personified. This further disorients the reader, mirroring the protagonist's experience, which cleverly ties back to the imaginary and dreamlike descriptions that were foregrounded earlier, each creating that sense of surrealism that both the reader and the character is now experiencing together. Then all of this disorientation and absurdity foregrounded within the context links to the following reference to Salvador Dali. This reference is the exterior text that links to the context, which is the primary text, in a way that further explains and supports it. Therefore, Brown incorporated Dali as an external reference to a painter famous for his surrealist field. The sense of absurdity within the unrelated and unrealistic elements within Dali's paintings reflects the absurdity within this point of the novel. Just as Dali's paintings are dreamlike and imaginary, so is the experience of Langdon. The reference therefore ties into foregrounding themes laid into the context to exploit the scene and really exaggerate the surreal moment that Langdon is experiencing, therefore strengthening the argument currently being made that Langdon is in the middle of a very confusing situation. Note that the reference here is to a famous painter, therefore indicating that the intended audience of this novel is that of a reasonably educated market due to their necessary recognition of the arts in order to understand this use of allusion. We can also note that the reference has been stylistically italicized. This separates the protagonist from the narrator, identifying the reference as an internal thought made by Langdon himself. This use of italics then shows the reader that this reference is knowledge known by the character as opposed to just a reference made by the narrator. The reference itself, being a famous painter, highlights Langdon's keen education of the arts. And as arts holds connotations of elitism, intelligence, and genius, Langdon's demonstrated in this way to have genius and intelligence himself, which is foregrounded in this use of allusion. This use of portraying Langdon as intelligent and foregrounding him as having some sense of genius establishes the character as a reliable voice of educated authority. Conclusively, this is a technique Brown utilises often within his work in order to foreground and link back to the ideas that he has expressed throughout the novel and support them through similar ideas of another text. In doing so, Brown is able to emphasise supported knowledge, this knowledge being the creator of the authoritative tone. The more support a text has through external references, the more authority that is owned in the content that is being delivered. From this, allusion helps to prime the readers through the authoritative tone for them to accept the ideas in the scene as truth, being a factor that leads to the light bulb moment. So now we know what allusion is and what it has to do with intertextuality, but how do we create this the way Dan Brown does? So let's break this down into some step-by-step instructions in order for us to use this in our own work. So to write the context of the story, that's the first step. This is basically just illustrating the scene or idea how we would normally write. For an example, we would be writing about a situation where a boyfriend is sneaking home late and his girlfriend is still up waiting. Now, in linking to this, we foreground the references that we're about to use through denotative description that holds connotative meaning you want to create. So, using this example of the boyfriend sneaking home, we might use a denotative description of him coming into the dark hallway and there being him making slow movements as he's creeping back through the door. And this creates connotative meaning of darkness and mystery and of secrets and lies. And then we link this to writing the reference, which is our second step. In writing the reference, we need to choose an exterior text that is famous or well known so that our audiences can recognize the meaning that we're trying to translate from one text to the other. An example of this, again going with our boyfriend sneaking home theory, we could use Pinocchio, which is a famous tale for children. And this is holding similar connotative meaning to the context in terms of Pinocchio's nose growing from his lies and secrecy, additionally to the boyfriend that may be telling lies or coming home secretly. Thirdly, we need to identify who is making the reference. The narrator may be the one making the reference, or perhaps the character is, such as Langdon's use of the Salvador Dali description. In order to differentiate who is making this reference, you could separate these two by italicizing internal character dialogue. So by use of italics, we are showing that the reference is being made through the thoughts and processes of the character. If you did want to make it just a third person narrating the reference and incorporating that intertextuality, then you could use the font that you were using throughout the rest of the story. In taking these steps, you will effectively link the reference to the context and support the foregrounding connotations you use through reference, which should clarify your intended meaning of that sneaky boyfriend being a compulsive liar, for example. Additionally, you will be able to highlight the allusion as more distant narration or a character's dialogue, which will determine characterization through their selective awareness of various texts. Finally, in incorporating allusion in your work, you will communicate an underpinning sense of truth in your descriptions, as the readers will subliminally feel that they are supported and reliable knowledge, thus creating that tone of authority that you may use as a platform to express and deliver your ideas within your piece. So now we've gone through the step-by-step instructions. Let's piece this together in a work that I've created, and then we'll pick that apart for those instructions that I've given you. It was my first time getting a wax. Friday was going to mark my third date with Flynn, and we all know what the third date means. More wine, shorter hemlines, and, well, you know, this terrified me. I hadn't been playing the field for a while, and I'm not even sure how to play, if I was honest. Not to mention the groundskeeper had been slacking off for a while now. The field was atrociously overgrown. Like, have you seen the movie Over the Hedge? Yep. And so with a playful push from my friends, I was booked into Julie's beauty bar. We all do it, they said. It's not that bad, they said. Like a little slap. Pack of liars, they are. Come Wednesday, and I was sheepishly creeping into the salon, cowering behind the marble counter. A polished blonde babe swanned around the corner and blinded me with her perfect, tight, toothy smile. She was a Barbie doll. What can we do for you today? She chimed. I'm booked in for a... I looked around, my cheeks burning. Brazilian? Alrighty. Have you been with us before? No. Next thing I knew, I was half nude with my knees in the air. My face was as bright as a red skin, and I was beginning to feel some serious regrets. A woman with an unruly mop of fiery hair entered the room and fitted latex gloves over her large, thick fingers, stretching and slapping the cuffs menacingly. I prayed on the Bible, Lord, give me strength. Suspense was building, I was praying, hot wax was smeared. Little heads up. They like to make small talk, you know, trick you into relaxing just a little, drawing you closer, forging a hint of trust before they take away your vision and set your loins on fire in one fell swoop. How's your day been, Dal? Busy? Well, not too, rip. I reached for my poor battered bits. What happened? Did she set me on fire? Meanwhile, this chick is giggling away at me in agony. First time, she had the gall to say. I don't know who this chick was, but she was some kind of twisted. Is this what you do, I thought? Snatch hairs off people all day? At this point, she's smearing again, and I'm still nursing the wound. I want to speak to Julie. Where the hell is Julie? Does she even know what's going on here? It's like the sequel to Saw up in here. I like your top, she said. I wasn't falling for it. Rip. My loins throbbed and Psalm 86.3 slipped out. I have mercy on me. 2 days later, and I'm still walking like I'm preparing for a shootout. Needless to say, the date has been cancelled. Flynn will have to wait for my full recovery. Never again, I tell you. Never again. Now, in unpacking this example, we can see that I have used 3 points of allusion through adhering to the DIY outline that we went through earlier. In the first example, we can see that I have, 1, written my context for each allusion. The first example showing the context of a hairy situation that needs maintenance for the upcoming date. This is, however, expressed through the field metaphor, which incorporates the use of descriptive foregrounding. I've supported this playing the field metaphor by threading in related metaphoric descriptions such as groundskeeper and overgrown. Denotatively, these metaphors all reflect the maintenance of a field. However, their connotative meaning relates to the culturally found link between the word bush and pubic hair. Therefore, I have used such green terms in my description to capitalise on this cultural connotative understanding. I then use this foregrounding descriptive metaphor to select my reference. The external text I chose is the children's film Over the Hedge, which continues with this green metaphor and further explains a situation through exaggeration. The hedge implies that she has a rather large, hairy situation, thus supporting the context in a way that expands on it. 3. Finally, I used a casual and intimate tone to identify the protagonist as the one using this allusion, further using italics in the title to reference and assert. In doing all of this, I have communicated a supportive link between the context of my story and the external reference in my allusion. This intertextual support thus creates the authoritative tone that forms a reliable narrator. The authority makes the protagonist seem assertive and honest, which primes the readers to readily accept the information that the character is giving them, to not get a wax, for example. Now, this process was used again in 2 other allusion examples that you will see in the tables. Conclusively, this technique is useful in creating that supported authoritative tone, which aids reliability of messages and meaning within our work. This technique of intertextuality is therefore powerful in leading us to believe each embedded message and to reach those light bulb moments. Now, I hope you found this presentation useful in understanding intertextuality as inspired from the Da Vinci Code, and I hope you attempt these techniques in your own writing, using these step-by-step examples that we've illustrated. Thank you very much.